Excellent. Thank you for joining us. I'm laughing at some of the movie recommendations coming through and appreciating the Hogfather specifically.
If you've seen it, you got it. It's on YouTube.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for indulging and giving us some good recommendations from for favorite holiday movies in the chat. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our assessment director meeting this December. Hopefully you're all in getting into countdown mode and getting some well-deserved time off in the next couple of days. And appreciate you joining us here today and looking forward to the chance that we have to share some information with you and to get feedback from you as well. So our quote for this month comes from Booker T. Washington. It is, "Few things can help an individual more than to place responsibility on him and to let him know that you trust him." So I appreciate all of you and the work that you're doing. I appreciate the team and the work that they're doing here at USBE and the responsibilities that they take on, and have the most trust in all of them. So I appreciate all of the work that the USBE staff do here for sure. A couple of updates for you. Erin wanted me to share that they found, one of the LEAs found some missing SGPs in their files as they were reviewing both the Tableau and Data Gateway, had a couple of missing SGPs for some students. So Erin and David Mackey are rerunning the SGP load. They're going to do that at the beginning of January. So that as they looked at their work load the next couple of days, and then they're also planned time off. They're planning the first day or two that we're back, so like the 5th or 6th of January, to rerun those SGP loads. And then those will be updated both in Tableau and the Data Gateway. If you have questions about what changes may be happening or what might be the questions around SGPs, if your specific results, you can contact Aaron. His email is listed here. So if you have questions about that, you can reach out to Aaron, but you'll know that you'll see those in early January. There may be some adjustments to SGPs, particularly if you had students that were missing. Okay. Board meeting update. So in our December board meeting, we had 2 rules that were passed unanimously, I think with both of them actually. Some updates to language, that updates and clarified some of the language on R277 716. That's the rule for alternative language services for UTES students. And then we also had some changes to the definition of student with significant cognitive disability in R277705. So you can link to those changes there on the slides. In January, really the only thing that will be assessment related at the board meeting is the updates to the math standards revision. So assessment adjacent with some standards revision updates. They're still in the process of going through. The board is now moving forward with the review of the recommendations after public comment. And so they'll be making their recommendations. We assume that we will be seeing those final math standards approved sometime March-ish, February, March, April, sometime around there. We'll see what that process looks like as the full board starts to get into their discussions for the math standards. But if you have any questions about upcoming board meetings, you can let us know about those. And then just another reminder, in our November meeting, we discussed an upcoming, I think you can switch to the next slide. We discuss upcoming legislation, so as we're quickly moving into our legislative season. In our November board meeting, there was this bill that came out in the Ed Interim Committee the day before our November AD meeting. So we briefly discussed it. I wanted to put that link here again. There have not been changes or anything to the recommended language yet with this draft bill for the education testing amendments. If you have feedback or would like to share comments or questions, you can reach out either directly to your state school board member, or even better, you can reach out to the drafter and sponsor of the bill, which is Representative Lisenby. So if you have questions or feedback or would like clarity or want to share opinions, Representative Lisenby is the person that you should reach out to with those requests or suggestions or feedback. There was a standalone like a special session of our board meeting where a person who works with Representative Lisenby came and shared with the state school board some of the reasoning behind why they're hoping that this bill moves forward. If you have feedback or want to watch that, you can watch the special session of the board meeting from December Friday. It was the 7th, I think. The Friday. Okay, the 5th. So from Friday, December 5th, there was a special session that talked about legislative requests. It was about an hour and 40 minutes into the meeting that they started talking about this specific bill. But if you have questions, or you can always reach out to us, you can always reach out to your state school board member, but also a good connection will be to reach out to Representative Lisenby. Okay, then a reminder about the other two assessment related funding requests that the board prioritized earlier this year, that we're seeking some funding for possibly a K-8 literacy and numeracy math and literacy initiative. That would be similar to what was done with K-3 literacy initiative with professional learning and assessment. That's priority number 4 from our board as far as funding. And then the priority 8 is similar, but if we didn't get funding for our priority 4, we need additional funding for our early math assessment because our contract with our K-3 math assessment right now with Acadians Learning expires in June of 2026. And we need additional funding to move forward with those licenses for that early math assessment. So if that's not funded in the K-8 literacy numeracy bill, then we need additional funding for our licenses for a math assessment for K-3. So those are the upcoming things that we are aware of right now and that we will be watching in the legislative session. If you have other feedback or other questions, please reach out and direct you to who might be best to answer those questions or to receive that feedback. Any questions on those things? All right, Brittany.
All right, you can go to the next slide. All right, we have an update to for our school report card timeline. Our school report card secure release, or the LEA embargo review, is going to start on Friday, January 9th, and it will be open through Friday, January 23rd. The public release is scheduled to go live on the afternoon of Monday, January 26th. So we'll have those 2 weeks where you can give us that feedback, check your data, and then it will go live. Can you go to the next one? There will be an email sent out on January 9th, and it's going to detail that secure access link. It will have the username and the password included. During this secure release window, we ask that LEAs review their school's data. USBE staff is also going to be looking at data to see if it's populating correctly. However, you as the assessment director are the expert in your data. So we really need your help checking to make sure that things are loading properly in order to really complete our quality assurance. So, and then the next slide. In the chat, this might be helpful, especially for those of you who are newer in this role, but also I'm new in this role, so this will help me too. Because we rely on your support checking that school report card data, if you can throw in the chat some of the things that you do to conduct your LEA level and school level data reviews, that would be super helpful. Like, what things do you check and how do you ensure that the data matches what has been submitted? So if you can throw those things in, yeah.
There is a quick question for you. Are we also going to receive school improvement data with that secure release?
Yes.
TSI, ATSI, and CSI?
Yes. So that information will be sent out to our schools that are in school improvement as well. And it will be on the link at the bottom of your schools or your LEA's school report card page. Yes, great question.
And then we had one more question. As a new LEA, we will, as a new this year, we will not have data to review this January, is that correct?
Correct. And then, of course, if you have any additional questions or concerns, you can reach out to myself, or you can reach out to Megan Tippett is one of our supporters with data and statistics. And between the two of us, we can answer any of the questions that you have. That's all.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jessica Wilhelm, one of our special education assessment specialists at USBE. Not here this morning, also, though we have Tracy Gooley, and here we just listed out the different assessments that we cover, which does help when you are sending emails. Of course, we will always get back to you, but these are the assessments we cover if you have specific questions about accommodations. Next page. Okay, one of the main things that you as assessment directors should hopefully have bookmarked, if not, that's your homework, is to bookmark the Utah Accessibility Accommodations and Participation Policy, which is located on our USBE special education website. And this is our most comprehensive resource that we have at USBE that outlines federal and state policy, surrounding the requirements for students with disabilities and their participation in statewide assessment, whether that be an IEP plan, a Section 504 plan, and it also has comprehensive information for our multilingual learners. If you are a new assessment director, you will probably find this resource to be extremely valuable for questions that are going to pop up as we enter this spring window. And then also I have a screenshot here of the page that it's on. And if you'll note here, there are some important resources that you'll probably access at some point during our assessments coming up. That includes our interpreter guidelines for state standardized assessment. And then also scribe guidelines. I'm sure every one of you might have at least one student that will be using a scribe at some point during one of the statewide assessments, and we have very specific guidelines for you to reference, but then also it's very important for whoever is going to be acting as the scribe for a student to be familiar with these outlined, this outlined guidance. And then another form that is, I wouldn't say frequently used, but you need to be aware of is our policy outlines as much as we possibly can think of possible accommodations that students are going to need. However, there's always going to be an exception. So on the very bottom of the screenshot, you see the USBE exceptional accommodation request form for assessment. This is going to be for accommodations that are not addressed within whatever assessment platform. So as an example, this might be used for a piece of assistive technology that we don't have guidance on, possibly for certain assessments. Or it could be used as an example, there could be a student who has a recent visual impairment, like maybe they have a degenerative eye disease and they have recently lost their vision, but yet that student does not currently know Braille. So for those students, we might need to think outside the box for something that's not considered already in policy. So you might put in that exceptional accommodation request to kind of like let us know, how is that student accessing instruction and what do we need to think about for the student to access statewide assessment? So that's an important form that you might need to use. Next slide. Okay, I've had a rise in emails from assessment directors and also special education staff who are asking for me to give recommendations on accommodations for their students' statewide assessments. And while I can address policy and give guidance to resources, laws, background experience, it is up to a team, whether that be an IEP team, a 504 team, staff members that are familiar with English learner needs. Those are decisions that are not made at USBE. So it's just important to be aware that these are team decisions made on individual student needs. USBE will never make a decision on behalf of a team. We can provide professional guidance, but just kind of a reminder, especially if you're a newer assessment director and you email me and say, hey, I have the student who, and explain something, what do you recommend? My recommendation first is, what has the team discussed? Okay. And then also another reminder is students' needs are not based on eligibility category. There can be a lot of misconceptions around this. Just telling me what a student's disability category is, again, is not a decision factor. My guidance to you is going to be, okay, what is the team discussed? What does their evaluation look like? Because you've been in education for more than 6 months, you probably know you could have a student with autism or 2 students with autism, and they're going to have very different needs. So it's not eligibility category related. It's very specific to the use of professional input for those team decisions. Next slide. In thinking about those team decisions, the key players are involved are information from teachers, parents, students as appropriate, administration, and then also if a student has a related service provider, such as a speech pathologist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, and then also, it varies from LEA to LEA, but if there is assistive technology staff at your school, which assistive technology is required point of discussion at all IEP meetings. That's a federal requirement. Now, how that is staffed at your LEA is going to vary. And if you're not sure, I would reach out to your special education director. Another tidbit of advice when you are thinking about how you can cross-collaborate with special education departments and administrators is we see often when it comes to statewide assessments, accommodations that students don't want to use. And one thing that comes up the most is extended time. Extended time can sometimes move a student away from their peers based on how you have to group assessment rooms. A lot of times that can frustrate students. They don't want to be moved away from their peers. So the point, and this could, be any accommodation, but the point here is when you are having robust conversations with all of these key people, really thinking about what is the student using instructionally on a routine basis, that's going to help you make the most informed decision about what really is the most appropriate and necessary for statewide assessment. And students' needs change over time. What a student maybe started out their IEP journey on in 4th grade is going to look different when they become 7th and 8th graders. And students can be an important part of that conversation as appropriate based on, their cognitive ability and their age. Students should, as appropriate, attend their IEP meetings, and we shouldn't be afraid to be getting student input. Now, I do want to caution that nobody on the IEP team can solely make an accommodation decision. So just the parent can't dictate to the IEP team, this is what I want. And just the student can't say, oh, well, I don't want to do this anymore. We want to express interest, but we also as professionals want to have professional input that is the most appropriate decision for a student. So not anybody is making a solo decision. It's all team decisions, but we don't want to forget about, that voice of the parent and the student as appropriate. Then the student's assistive technology needs, that is a federal IDEA requirement, should always be addressed at every IEP meeting. And it is up to that IEP team to know what assistive technology the student needs. And if there is a very unique piece of equipment that the student uses, and this usually is involved with students with maybe visual impairments or significant motor impairments in which they cannot work a standard mouse or keyboard operations, like I'm talking about high-tech devices, that should be documented in an IEP. And that's something that you should be having a conversation with your special education directors about, like starting now, are there any students who have an IEP or a 504 plan who have very unique AT needs? Because you need to be thinking about that sooner than later of how that fits into assessment. Next slide. Okay, we love policy at USBE, and you should too. So one of the main policies that we adhere to when it comes to participation in assessments for students with disabilities falls in IDA section 300.161 that specifically dictates that all children with disabilities should be included with our statewide assessments with appropriate accommodations. Okay, so when we are making our accommodation guidance for the state, this is adhering to IDEA policy. Next slide. Okay, and so this is a continuation of what that policy states, and specifically in that policy, it directs states to identify accommodations for each assessment that do not invalidate the score. So this is really the heart of where our accommodation decisions come in. We want to ensure that how students are accessing assessments are getting a score that is indicative of the standards being assessed at particular grade and subject levels. So for example, the use of a calculator is a very common question within standardized assessments. So we have very specific policy in conjunction with our math specialist at the state, where we feel based on grade level standards that we start to have that as an allowable accommodation, but then we also have grades in which it's not allowable. And it really goes back to what are the standards being assessed at those particular grade levels. And then right here, as you see, it says instruct IEP teams to select accommodations that do not invalidate the score. So that is why from the very first slide that I addressed that accommodations policy, you really need to be familiar with that. And that way you have an understanding of the guidance that we have laid out. And all of that guidance is really with this IDA policy in mind. And that is every student has a right and to access participation. And I really like to focus on the fact that every student has to have a right versus like, oh, they must take it. Because when we look back at special education policy, a lot of it is driven out of advocacy. And you think back 40 years ago, a lot of these students with disabilities, they did not even have the right or the opportunity to be participating in public education in the way they do today. So sometimes educators become frustrated with certain students with disabilities and they feel like, oh, assessment is a burden. But really, when you think of the origin of special education policy, it really comes out of finding justice and equity so that all of these students are part of the conversation in education. Next slide. Okay, as a reminder, accommodations are only determined by teams, not any individual staff member. USBE does not provide determinations. Now there are, and you'll find this in the policy, there are certain accommodations in which you do have to request USBE approval, but the main reason we are requesting approval for a couple of accommodations is simply we're looking at compatibility. And that really is often around assistive technology. So when you fill out those AT request forms within systems for any assessment, it can't be vague. It needs to be specific, because then what we are doing is we are checking with our assessment vendor to ensure that whatever device the student needs is going to function appropriately within those secure testing environments. And another point on team decisions is, as in just an example, this week I had a question from somebody in the field, and they asked me, we have a parent, this is important. They said to me, we have a parent and a student who don't want to use a certain accommodation. What do I need to do? Okay, this is super important. Again, it's a team decision. I could point to a lot of case law. You do not ever just take information solely from a parent or a student and be like, oh, okay, that's what the parent wants. That's what we're going to do. Because if you as a professional really feel that a certain accommodation is warranted, how the legal system sees that is you need to be inputting that professional judgment, because there has been instances where teams take that just like, oh, mama doesn't want to do this, we're not going to do it, or student doesn't want to do this, we're not going to do it, when really the more appropriate decision was to provide it, and then later down the law, then the parents use that against the school. Mm-hmm. Now I know that's extreme situation, but there for sure is case law about that. And again, especially at the end of the day, when you're getting a admin signature and a parent signature, you want to make certain that those two professional or people in attendance are most in agreement. So my recommendation back to the person who asked me that, is that you need to be discussing that with the team. You need to check in with your administrator. And if the team is like, you know what, yeah, I think that's a good decision. We do agree with this, request by a parent or, the student, as long as the entire team is in agreement with the change, you need to either make an amendment to that student's plan, or if the team, it's particularly the administrator, that's not really the decision that they agree with, like if they disagree with the parent, you need to put that in your record. You need to have a record of something like, the recommendation of the LEA is for the student to use, ABC accommodation. We are offering that to the student. However, parent and student do not agree, and you need to have a signature and put that on file, because if you didn't discuss it and you didn't document, then it never happened. So that's my advice. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to go into a few overarching resources. I know this is a little bit out of order, but I wanted to kind of keep this accommodation information in the same place within our meeting today. Here are some very important resources that you need to be referring to for RISE specifically. There's three main things that you will use to gain more knowledge about RISE accommodations, and one that is our RISE Test Administration Manual. Within the Test Administration Manual, it is going to outline all of your resources that are available to every student, and then it separates down into accommodations. It's really important. I'm really speaking to our newer staff here. It's very important that you are familiar with all of the resources and accommodations available within each assessment system, because they're going to vary from a system to system and how things function. And that's just not just for students with disabilities, that's all kiddos. So that's a great resource. And then the TIDE user guide is going to give information for how to submit state level requests and how to set up those accommodations for the RISE system. And then we also have a RISE assistive technology manual, which is probably going to be something that every person needs to look at this year for at least one student. And that outlines third-party AT equipment that might be used for a student. So that outlines known third-party devices that do function within the secure testing environment, which a major one is speech to text. While RISE does have embedded speech to text, sometimes it's not preferred by a student. So our vendor has outlined known compatible third-party speech to text. It also has a lot of guidance for Braille configuration, and then some alternate input devices like an eye gaze. Next slide. So it's very important that you are available, or you are aware of the different resources. Again, resources are available to all students versus accommodations. So for an example, text-to-speech is embedded in RISE, and that is not considered an accommodation. So if a student has like the use of a human read or text-to-speech as an accommodation instructionally, for RISE, for everything except for our reading passages, that is just a feature that any student can access. And that just helps with decision making, just to kind of know, because you were going to get those questions from special education staff. Hey, is this accommodation allowable? And that's why you need to look to these resources, and then you can give them that guidance. Oh, yeah, it's already available to them already. In fact, it's available to all students. For RISE, there are no hard deadlines for submitting accommodations. You just want to make certain that you have set them up in the TIDE system prior to the students starting that administration. And then there's a couple of screenshots here for what it looks like within the TIDE system when you are submitting a request that requires state level approval, and that's going to be for speech to text, scribe, and assistive technology. And again, this is all in the guidance. Next slide. Okay, and so for Utah Aspire Plus, starting to get some questions around this as well. Our Utah Aspire Plus Spring 2026 Test Administration Manual should probably be posted in January. However, we have no changes to accommodations. So what is posted for the 2025 is still an excellent reference point for you to access. For UA Plus, there are no hard deadlines for accommodation requests. But there is a window in which you need to be aware of. In February, UA Plus will have an additional orders window, and that is going to be for accessing and ordering Braille, large print paper, and just standard paper copies. So if you have a student who has those needs, that window for ordering will open up in February. And Pearson, our vendor for UA Plus, just asked for at least 2 weeks a notice so that they can get those materials together and ship them to your site. All right, next slide. Okay.
Quick question in the chat.
Submitting requests.
It can really vary. I think it specifically asked for 4 weeks in our manuals. I think it says submit them 4 weeks in advance. Actually, okay, next slide. Okay, for ACT, if you did not attend the ACT accommodations training in September, that is posted. However, I would look at this link that says what's new for the ACT, because there were some key changes in English learner supports. So if you have not reviewed what's new for English learners, strongly recommend you jot that down as a homework assignment if you oversee ACT. If you have identified who is going to be your test accommodation coordinator, they should have received an email just this past Monday about prompting you about upcoming deadlines. So very important to read that message from ACT. Next slide.
There was another question.
Okay, this was what we're asking the answers, but I just want to clarify for students who have an IEP with accommodation, is it the AD that's going to vary, Jen, on your LEA? Have you set that up? I would say most LEAs, that is not true. It is not the AD who does that. There's no rule at USBE on who inputs that. It's going to depend on how their access is labeled. Yeah, there's no hard rule on that. Terralyn, the setup of the appendices in the accommodations policy is very clear and easy for teachers. Oh, thank you, Terralyn. Okay, I'll give myself a pat on the back for that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so a newer change, if you did not attend the ACD accommodations policy, our more veteran people in the field may know that ACT has always historically had one initial accommodations deadline, and they do not bend from that. However, they have listened to states, and there are now 3 separate accommodation deadlines. The deadlines correspond to whichever test event you have selected for your LEA. So we have 3 separate test windows in Utah. So there's 3 separate deadlines as well. So your deadline corresponds to your test event. If you miss, and this is only a benefit if you're in test event 1 or 2, if you miss your deadline, ACT will not do anything about it. And their recommendation is you're going to have that student test in the next window in order for them to have their accommodations, okay? Now, if you're in test event 3 and you miss the window, well, then you at the LEA are probably going to have to pay for that student to have the opportunity to participate in a national test date, okay? Now, one other change with deadlines for ACT is, so when you first submit your accommodation for ACT, they will give you a decision notification, and they're either going to approve your accommodation or they're going to reject it. If it was not approved, you have an opportunity to place what ACT refers to as a reconsideration. This reconsideration is the same deadline as the initial. Okay, and why that's important to know is for people who are procrastinators and you are submitting something, say, the day before, you might not get a decision notification. In fact, you probably will not get a decision notification by the time your window closes. So you then therefore don't have an opportunity to do that reconsideration. So I strongly, strongly, strongly advise to submit request early, at least 2 weeks before your deadline, because there's just nothing that I can do for our little procrastinators. And I feel your pain because I thrive on a hard deadline, okay? But you really need to program some time into your routine to submit these requests early on behalf of your students, because you don't want to have to tell a student, oh, sorry, I missed this deadline. You're going to have to test by yourself at a different time away from your peers. That's not a fun conversation. Okay, next slide.
There's
Okay.
question.
Ashley, if a parent is unable to get you the required diagnosis letter for ACT, do you just have the student test without accommodations? The student has testing accommodations in a 504. I've reached out with multiple reminders to the parents and haven't received anything. So Ashley, that brings more questions to me than not. I prefer if you email me because I have some follow-up questions. I mean, one, I don't know how a student has a 504 plan without any record of a diagnosis. So one, like, why does the student have the plan? At some point, I'm assuming the student did provide information or you wouldn't have a 504 plan for them. So I have follow-up questions if you can email me. I don't have an answer because I have more questions for you. Okay. Okay, ACT now is your main hub for resources and tips, and I've taken a screenshot. There are ample resources on ACT with very easy to read user guides. I love their user guides. I much prefer to look at a guide than watch a video or hear somebody talk like I'm talking now. So bookmark this resource and you can refer to these guides so you know how to utilize the systems for ACT. It's very important after you've submitted your accommodation request, which is submitted in the TAA system, that you check your decision notification, okay? Just because you submitted a request, you need to be checking that to see were these approved or not. If something was not approved, sometimes that is a nudge to you that you need to follow up. And that could be something as a simple, maybe you submitted something that could be corrected, okay? Or maybe you submitted something and you kind of maybe think that ACT did not make the right decision. So you need to check those decisions, particularly for the ones that were rejected, and follow up. Okay, if you really feel that ACT did not make the right decision, because these are actually humans at ACT checking each request, and there have been mistakes made in the past. Scott will attest to you, I will advocate for your kiddo.
Oh, yeah.
And I will review it, and if I think that you're right, I will let you know and I will do what needs to be done. And in those cases, ACT has always sided with us. So if you're bringing it to us and we feel there's some advocacy on it, ACT will reverse those decisions. But again, we can't do that if you're not looking, okay? Next slide. Okay, and so this is just a screenshot of that TA. You're wanting to check those decision notifications. You're gonna wanna go in there and make certain that you see what action ACT has made so that you know what you need to do as an LEA. Okay, next slide. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Next slide. All right, so we just finished up STAMP, the STAMP assessment, and I just thought I'd let you know you can download your results. They can be downloaded LEA level, school level, class level. If your teacher just has that teacher test code that they sign in with, they can download their class data. All you have to do is go to the right-hand side of your screen and click that little down arrow. It might take a minute for that file to generate, but then you just click test taker data. It downloads everyone that's on a roster and their results into a little Excel file for you. It's very handy.
It'll also be available in Tableau eventually.
Yes. Okay. Oh, in Tableau, ooh, that actually not a yes. We don't usually do a lot with the dual immersion results. I think we have started putting those results in Tableau though. I will double check on that, but I'm pretty sure that's a yes. Asterisk. Yes, asterisk.
Thank you.
Next slide. All right, so the ACT pre-ID file was uploaded. From now on, if you need to make changes to your students, you can do that manually. If you had a student that transferred to you from another school, please go into ACT now and request that student be transferred to you so we don't have students on multiple rosters. The second pre-ID file for WIDA went in last week, so you should be seeing your updated students in DRC. If you do not, you can get in touch with me or Megan and we can check it out for you. No students were removed, so if you had students that transferred out, they will still be on your list. Please just disregard them and we'll take care of it after the testing window closes. Also, please ensure that any students that you manually add to DRC, to ACT, their name, their SSID, everything matches what is in Utrex. When we get the results later on, we have to do a lot of, especially for WIDA, we have to do a lot of matching because the name is different. You put in the, school ID instead of the SSID. So just a little bit of care at the beginning will save everybody a lot of work at the end.
And possibly money.
And money, yes, because if we get past a window and we realize someone has some results missing for WIDA, it might cost you a little bit of money to get those results merged and taken care of. So also for WIDA, please pay attention when you are bubbling in those test booklets. That's the second place where where the data is incorrect. So use your number 2 pencil and bubble in those booklets correctly, please. Next slide. All right, so RISE still having issues updating. Last month, while I was enjoying myself on vacation, they put in a fix and they got everybody in the right place that wasn't in the right place. But they didn't take care of all those people stuck on their old rosters. They did just let us know that they have a fix they're putting out. It was supposed to go out yesterday. I'm still seeing students hanging out on old rosters, so maybe we have to wait for another nightly upload to go through. We'll see by the end of the week. I'm hoping you'll see all those students that are just hanging on drop off. please. I'm Rudolph, Santa, come on. Get those students off those rousters. Obviously, we don't see a change, by the end of this week, I'll get back in touch with our TIE team and see what's going on. We also had an update, speaking of updates, for ALO, they let us know.
Oh, Dallas, that's Dallas's slide.
Oh,
Can't take
never
it.
mind.
Sorry.
I'm not even surprised. Don't let Dallas give the good news, but wait, you're gonna be so happy when Dallas talks about it. I promise. It put a giant smile on my face.
Still her slide.
I was so happy. You're gonna be happy. That's all it was a Christmas miracle. All right, so I won't steal her thunder. Next slide. All right, that's it for me. That's it for December. Yeah, happy holidays, everybody.
All right, Rita, yay. First, just want to say happy holidays. Fun fact, not sure if anyone knew this. International holiday today. Anyone? Answer the phone like Buddy the Elf Day. I challenge you all. I know. We all want it, everyone's favorite color, right? Yes, so lean into it. If you call me, I might just answer the phone that way. All right, I hope I do. Okay, to get to the question that was in the chat about the criteria for translating of any of our assessments, I put the link in the chat. There are 2 forms. And one of them is the guidance for the different criteria.
About wanting new tires on her car before winter.
We're having some interference, and sorry that our cameras aren't working either today. But if you go and look at those resources, just scroll down on that link that I put in the chat and you'll see the guidance and it'll walk you through. Please don't just assume because we have the Spanish adaptive translations for RISE in Utah Aspire Plus, that doesn't mean we have those available for all the other tests. And it is just directions only for WIDA as well. So if a student does need anything translated, Spanish, any other language, it is just for directions, not content for WIDA specifically. But the guidance is there and the forms to request those translations are on the website there as well. So I also really want to lean into Maureen's suggestion about bubbling. This happens every year, and I know y'all are like, she's a broken record, but every year it happens to multiple LEAs. Please, please, please remind your test administrators, especially the ones that are administering any paper access forms, especially kindergarten. Please make sure that they are actually bubbling. The biggest mistake that we see is the administrator will put a check mark in the bubble or just a line through the bubble. And I know we got to go back to the 90s, y'all. Like, I'm like, okay, that person must be young. You don't know how to bubble. Our younger test administrators, they may have never seen a Scantron in their life, but introduce them to the world of bubbly. It'll be fun. It'll be a new skill they can put on their resumes and stuff like that. So please just really, really remind them, because we have seen this actually be thousands of dollars costly mistake for LEAs. So please, please make sure that they are bubbling correctly. All right, as we are approaching the holidays, customer service hours will be a little different, but I gotta say, if you are like needing customer service over the holidays, I'm gonna challenge you to just, instead of calling customer service, go spoil yourself and do something nice for yourself. But if for some reason you're like, it's the only time I can get anything done, and you do need help, these are the updated hours during the holiday season. Next. We do have one more training that will be hosted in partnership with WIDA. And that will be the end of January, so in the new year. It'll be a training that is for students that are dually identified, so multilingual students that have disabilities. That is still open for registration, but that'll be closing soon. Get that opportunity out. Next. And then WIDA is always providing free webinars to LEAs that you can go jump into. And if you can't make it during the live webinar, they are always recorded and they are posted to the secure portal as well. So those are the upcoming ones, all related to access. The one that I would say is probably the most useful on this page is the data validation, and that's where you get to clean up your data and make sure if you had to do anything manually, you are ensuring, as Maureen already said, student names are matching and they're spelled correctly, student IDs, and grades. We've seen students be off by one letter for names, one number by SSID, even the grade every now and then. So taking special care will help, but if mistakes are made, that data validation will help walk you through the process, and we'll of course be sending out information, and DRC sends out information with step-by-step guides on how to do it all.
Yep, and I do a state validation, but I am looking at the results for every single student that takes the assessment across the entire state.
60,000 students.
Yes, so if you can do yours, you're just looking at your LEA, which is a much smaller number. So if you do yours, and I do, and if you do yours before I do mine, we will miss a lot less.
Yeah.
There will be far fewer mistakes.
Yep. All right, next. All right, so when we get back from the winter break, guess what? We're basically gonna be in it. Now, we did load the second pre-ID file. If you do not see students that should have been added to AMS, most likely something is amiss in your SIS. Reach out to myself and Maureen and we can help you get that straightened out. Most likely it is going to take you entering those students with care manually in AMS. And remember that all the materials that we ordered for you all, they should have been received already. You should have actually gotten those either Friday or this Monday. If you're having an issue with knowing where your shipments are, please contact DRC. They should have sent you UPS tracking information. Make sure that someone is there to actually sign for it and that the person knows they should sign for it, because we actually have had LEAs send testing materials back. So make sure that people are aware and there to receive them, especially if you're ordering additional materials. But you can order additional materials if needed. Now that started last week, and do remember that they do give you some overage additional materials extras when they send your stuff. So see what you have first, and then put your additional materials in. And just remember, additional materials need to be put in the additional materials tab. That's probably the most common question I get during testing. Hey, it says it's closed. Well, that's because the first initial one closed, so now it's all additional. Next. Again, testing, we've discussed this also in the past. There's 2 months to test. So we very strongly encourage LEAs to take that entire 2 months to get testing completed. Remember that this is an assessment that is directly tied to our ML students' civil rights. We need to give them ample opportunity to engage in testing as it is their right. And if we are limiting their access and opportunity to testing, that kind of puts us in some murky waters. So if you are waiting till the last week to test, and maybe the student's sick, did you really provide ample opportunity for that student to engage in their right, which is testing? I know testing's not always the best right to have, but it is a right, and it is something that we need to do. So, again, if you have any questions or you need any assistance, Tracy and I are happy to help assist you in coming up with, testing plans. We can show you examples, but also, the test administration manual for Access has some example testing schedules and plans as well. Next. As a reminder, we have the new Braille accommodation for the speaking domain. So, and I've been sending information out about that. This is a great opportunity for students that do have Braille to engage now in the speaking domain. So make sure though that you're reading all the information and for test administrators to go through that training as well. Thanks. Still alternate exit update. This is something that we've been getting questions about. We are very apologetic that we still are waiting the approval. So students still cannot be exited. And a bunch of LEAs did voice concern saying, well, we don't want to have to test the students again if they did actually exit. Unfortunately, again, this is federal law. Without it being approved by the US Department of Education, we can't allow the students to be exited until we get that approval. So they will, excuse me, they will need to take the test if they are an alternate access test taker. We apologize that it does take a long time. And as many of you are aware, there have been a lot of shifts with personnel and staffing at the US Department of Education. So things are just taking a long time. So there is one person right now staffing all of Title III. So she is inundated with a lot of work right now. So we'll let you know and we'll provide guidance as soon as everything does get approved, which we're planning on. We're just going with positive thinking. It's gonna be approved, right? Okay. So apologies though, we will keep you posted. Next. Also, thank you. We have reached out to the LEAs that will be observed for access. Thank you for those of you that have gotten back. Just a couple of reminders about observations for any assessments. These are not compliance. These are not evaluation. This is part of our federal peer review requirements to show that we are out there in the field actually seeing how these tests are going and operating, there to provide technical assistance when needed, troubleshoot. So again, this is not any kind of compliance. Please do note that. We greatly appreciate you opening your school doors to us to come in and help us meet these requirements. But it really is truly informative. It's not just checking off a box for us. It really does help us know what is happening in the classrooms. How can we better assist you? So those of you that we did reach out to and you have gotten back to us, thank you so much. We are looking forward to working with you and seeing access testing. If you are still an LEA that would really like us to come to just be there, we are happy to come and be technical assistants and boots on the ground with you all during testing.
Megan, is that for all testing or just WIDA?
So all summative assessments this year are for along the Wasatch Front,
Okay.
but only those that have been selected, and it is random. Those that have been selected for WIDA access, those LEAs have been contacted.
But not for Rise or Aspire.
Not yet for Rise or Aspire.
Thank you.
That's coming.
Okay. Next, I feel like that might be it. Yep, contact information, reach out and let us know how we can help you. And thank you for all that you are doing for our students, and we appreciate you all.
Okay.
Acadians. So, as Maureen alluded to, we have some very exciting news and a Christmas miracle on the next slide. Starting on January 8th, ALO will be updated to have teacher names on the class names. Woohoo! Yes! So it will look similar to what you have here on the screen. So it will say the class name and then the last name of the teacher in parentheses. So there's an example there for you to see what that's going to look like. If you have multiple teachers assigned to the class in your SIS, it will show multiple teachers in those parentheses. So just keep that in mind that it will be there. But January 8th, you should see teacher names on the class names as well.
Or maybe give them till the 9th. If it's.
The release is on the 8th.
Hey, don't take back the gift.
One day later, then.
It's a gift. Last AV meeting, we said March. So,
Yes.
well, we were hoping for March, but now we actually have a date to be looking forward to. So check for that around January 8th or 9th, maybe even the 10th.
There's a lot of rejoicing on.
Yes.
Yes.
Hearts and applauses and.
I think all of us were just as happy as everyone who's commenting. We were very excited to see this. Next slide.
There is a.
Yeah,
quick
so
moment.
no, please do not change the names. It's going to be, if you edit the class and change the name, when it goes overnight and all the data syncs again through USBE, it will revert back to the other old class names. So, I mean, you could do it, but you'd have to do it every single day, and that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
No, please don't. Another celebration that we wanted to share was some Acadians reading progress monitoring data. So this chart is progress monitoring according to LEAs of students who have a well below benchmark, and to see the comparison from spring 2023 to fall 2025. So looking just at those first columns, in the spring of 2023, there were 46% of LEAs who had progress monitored their well below students at 49% or less on rate. But this fall, when we just looked at our progress monitoring data, only 8% of LEAs had been progress monitoring their well below students at 49% or less. And then looking at those far columns, for monitoring students who were well below at rate between 90 and 100%, in the spring of 2023, 8% of LEAs were doing that. But as we just looked at it for fall of 2025, 48% of our LEAs had progress monitored their well below students at 90 to 100% at rate. So that was very, very exciting to see. We've almost flip-flopped those numbers there. So thank you for everything you are doing with progress monitoring. Thank you for supporting your teachers and your students and using that progress monitoring data to identify gaps and holes and help students to achieve higher reading levels. So just a little bit of a celebration there. Like I said, we are pretty excited to see those numbers. Next. Speaking of progress monitoring, you do have to enroll your students into progress monitoring on ALO in order for it to show up in your calendar of telling you when students are due for your progress monitoring. However, when data is pulled to look at students who are being progress monitored at rate according to their composite score, all students are included in that data. So please go back through and make sure that your red students and your yellow students are enrolled in progress monitoring, so that way we can make sure they are getting the progress monitoring that they need at rate. I recently sent out emails about progress monitoring rates for the fall. I will be pulling the next progress monitoring for February and March in like middle of April. So expect to see emails and certificates for spring rates in late April and early May. Next, please. And then I had a few questions about progress monitoring and how to view progress monitoring in ALO. There is not a progress monitoring fidelity report in ALO, but there are a few different options to look for progress monitoring that we're going to go through. Before we do that though, I just want to make sure that you understand the color guide, because the progress monitoring color guide is a little bit different than the color guide when it comes to the composite scores. So students who have a green on progress monitoring, this means that these students were being monitored at their set frequency and their last 3 data points are above the aim line. So ALO can make a prediction that they are going to meet their end of year goal if instruction continues the way that it has been continuing. Students who are showing yellow on their progress monitoring, that means that these students are being monitored at rate, but their last 3 data points are varied. Some are above the aim line and some are below the aim line, so a prediction can't be made yet. Next slide.
Question.
Oh. Okay, when you calculate the progress monitoring rate, do you count any progress monitoring per student, or are you looking for particular measures depending on the student's benchmark scores? So I am looking at the composite score. The composite score sets the frequency. So a student who has a red composite score should be progress monitored every 1 to 2 weeks. A student who has a yellow composite score should be progress monitored every 3 to 4 weeks. Then you can use your sub-measures to determine what skills to be progress monitoring on. Students really should only be progress monitored on one skill at a time, and it should match the intervention that they are receiving. I specifically am just looking to make sure that they're being progress monitored at rate. So those reds are being progress monitored every 1 to 2 weeks. Yellows are being progress monitored every 3 to 4 weeks. Our greens as well should be progress monitored every 4 to 6 weeks. And then blue should be progress monitored once between benchmarks. When I pull data though, I am specifically looking at our red and yellow students, as that is what is part of our Senate Bill 127. Okay, next slide, please. Talking about those progress monitoring colors. So when you're looking at your progress monitoring, again, please remember that the colors are different than the composite colors. When you are looking at your progress monitoring report, students who are showing a red for their progress monitoring, this means that they have been progress monitored at rate, but their last 3 data points are below the aim line. So there's a prediction there that the student is not going to meet their end of year goal unless something is changed. So that's why we want to be looking at our progress monitoring data so we can make those changes quickly. So consider just immediate modification to instruction and to intervention for those students who have red on their progress monitoring. And then students who have gray on their progress monitoring, this could mean one of 2 things. It could mean that the student has too few data points, which could be like your blue students who are only progress monitored once between benchmarks, or it could be students that are not being monitored at the set frequency. So if you have a student who has a red or yellow composite score and they're showing up gray in their progress monitoring, you're going to want to go back and look at those students, because it means that they are not being progress monitored as frequently as they should be. We also have another comment or question in the chat for the rate. Do you take enrollment dates into account? If a student moves into the LEA, does the calculation take that into account? So they aren't counting against the LEA from the previous months. They were not enrolled at the LEA. Yes, that is taken into account. And we do look at that when we're looking at progress monitoring. So Jason, that is taken into account. Thank you for asking that question. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's 3 ways to look at ALO progress monitoring. Like I said, there's not a progress monitoring fidelity report that you can pull, but you can look at the dashboard overview for progress monitoring. So this shows all of your students and it has those color guides that we just talked about. If you hover over sections of the status bar, it will display additional information, and then you can click into that and see the additional information for students in those categories. The next way to look at progress monitoring, next please, is by looking at the student list view. So you would just go to your student list first, and then you click on the hamburger menu on the right-hand side of the screen and click on PM status. This will show you little triangles Those colors again correlate to those color guides that I mentioned before. This shows you 4 specific measures that the student is enrolled in. So if the student is enrolled in more than one measure, it shows you how the student is performing on that progress monitoring. Again, students should be progress monitored on 1 skill at a time, maybe 2, depending on the situation, but it really should match the interventions that the student is receiving. On your student list, you can also click on the 3 dots on the side of the page, and that will allow you to export all of your progress monitoring student data. That gives you a huge spreadsheet, but it can really be beneficial. I know we have a comment in the chat. I'm gonna show the 3rd way that we can look at progress monitoring, and then I will answer that. The 3rd way is to go to the student overview graphs. So select the individual student, and then you can look at their progress monitoring in relation to their aim line, which is just on the student's individual profile. So in the chat, Diana asked, what is the student's composite is green, but a submeasure is yellow? Which frequency do we follow, the green composite or the yellow subskill? Diana, that is an excellent question. Thank you so much. So Acadiance's guidelines are that you would follow the composite score. So the composite score is what determines the rate. Now, best practices would be that we are looking at those submeasures and we're still finding and identifying holes and gaps that the student has and intervening on those holes and gaps. So looking at your submeasure skills is still really valuable, but when you're looking at the rate of frequency for progress monitoring, use your composite score. And Brooke, yes, Dallas is the one speaking right now. Next slide, please. All right, and I am going to let Jared take it from here and share some other Acadians information.
Sure, so.
Yes, we do have that. It was shared, I believe, in the last AD meeting. So Jason, let me see if I can find those links for you, and I will share those with you.
Sorry, Jared.
No, that's all right. Okay, so we have posted the training that occurred a month ago or so, I think in October, for the BOY data analysis. And so you have links there on the slide for those YouTube videos. All right, next slide. So I've received a few questions about progress monitoring, and we just went through it for Acadiance Reading, and Acadiance Reading has a lot more requirements for progress monitoring and kind of the process and everything behind that. For Acadiance Math, it's not required and it's optional. And so we've shared a recommendation, and based on this recommendation, then there were some questions that came back mostly about, okay, if you don't want us to do progress monitoring, what do you want us to use? Which I guess kind of goes to what Jessica shared earlier, where at the state, we don't really tell you in that way what to do. We might share what other LEAs are using, but we don't say when it applies to curriculum and instruction. We don't do it in that way. So I wanted to clarify kind of the why for the recommendation. So there are 2 purposes that you might, well, maybe you use it for more, but 2 clear purposes that we thought about as we considered this recommendation. So the first one is if your purpose is to measure the progress of the student in learning a certain math skill. So you've given Acadiance Math, you've noticed that one of the sub skills that was measured is below or well below. And so you want to provide some instruction and support in that particular skill. And you want to measure whether your instruction's working or not. Is a student learning that skill? The other purpose is maybe you want to administer this maybe once a month or in between the 2 benchmarks, just to see, are my students on track in a general way, more composite score. If they were to take this, if they were to take the benchmark today, how might they score? Just to give me a general idea. Next slide. So really our recommendation for kindergarten and first grade, the measures are very specific and they're very narrowly focused on certain skills. For computation and concepts and application, teachers give this worksheet, and within that worksheet or worksheet packet are multiple skills, a whole variety of skills that are looking at what students might know. So as you look at this example I provided, so a student scored 10 on this progress monitoring, you can see the scoring there. Based on that 10, what skill are you gonna help this student with? That's a question you can reflect on. I don't know that you can answer it to yourself, but looking at that worksheet and a score of 10, thinking, okay, what skill am I gonna help this student with? Well, a skill isn't, I'm gonna help the student go faster so that they can get more points. It's all about the math. So as we considered the recommendation, you notice as you're looking at that screenshot, that worksheet measures a whole variety of skills, not only addition and subtraction, but then multiple ways or numbers for that addition. Next slide. So it's called a response pattern analysis form, but you can see on this form right here, if I were to count each row of the skills assessed, this is for second grade, I would see that there are 11 different skills assessed within that worksheet that you just saw. So if I'm just looking at that worksheet, honestly, I don't know where I'm gonna go with that. Other than it might flag whether they're above or well above or below or well below. So as I looked at the worksheet based on the scoring, I've highlighted the numbers 3 and 14 because number 3 was the student missed that one, and then number 14 wasn't answered. So I can narrow it down now to a specific skill. So the student may need support with subtracting a 1-digit number from a 2-digit number of 20 or more with renaming. Now I have somewhere to go with my instruction, and I can provide that support and that instruction. Next slide. Oh, go back, sorry. Getting ahead. So if I think about this, if I'm going to provide instruction to a group of students on subtracting 1-digit number from a 2-digit number, that's great, but if I go if I wanna see if my instruction has been valuable and if students are learning, giving them a worksheet and timing them for however long, for whatever grade 2 might be on that worksheet, I think it's 2 minutes, but I'm not sure. If you hand that worksheet to the student and then you're only checking 2 questions on the entire worksheet, that might not be as focused as if you were to use something else that really targeted that specific skill that you're providing instruction. So that's where that recommendation comes in for computation and concepts and application, is that worksheet has a variety of skills it's measuring. If you're focusing on 1 or possibly 2, like Dallas said for reading, if you're focusing on really narrow number of skills and you hand out that worksheet as progress monitoring and the student takes their time, maybe they don't even answer number 3 and 14. So it doesn't even give you any data related to your progress monitoring. And so we felt like, yeah, you can use it, and it might be more beneficial just to see how your students are doing overall. But as far as really targeted progress monitoring, there's probably something that's better out there. Next slide. And so the second purpose that I mentioned is just measuring how students may perform on the upcoming benchmark. So if you even have students who are in green or blue, so above or at or above benchmark, and you want to just double check, you can administer this, and this will give you an idea. And I've showed here an example on the left. So a student scores 27 on the, just if you follow that arrow over, those are the different cut points for the scores throughout the year. So you have beginning, middle, and end of year. So at beginning or middle of year, I might feel really good that the student's scoring 27 and not have any concerns that's gonna be at or above. But if this is the end of the year, or I'm looking at the end of the year as far as a score, I can say, well, the student scored 27, at benchmark's gonna be 29 at the end of the year. I might wanna look at this a little bit deeper. So just using professional judgment and based on the time of year, what you might do that way. Next slide. And so this then is in response to the questions we've gotten is, so if we're not going to use progress monitoring for computation, are there things out there that might be better that we might use? And so Molly Basham, who's on our teaching and learning side for early learning, has provided this information. There's a link there to some information as well as Molly's email if you want to reach out related to progress monitoring supports and things that might be used for interventions throughout the state.
There is a question in the chat.
Well, I think that's an important question, because Acadience isn't necessarily measuring fluency. It does help with fluency, but the timing isn't to see how fast they do things or how quickly they move through it. It's to make sure it's short, kind of short and sweet, and that it's always standardized, that every time a student takes it, it's always 1 minute or it's always 2 minutes. And so the fluency isn't necessarily that they have to do everything on that entire page.
And Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, but is fluency specifically any part of our Utah standards? Like specifically with the time component, the student must do A in this amount of time. That's not in our Utah standards, correct?
No, fluency, the definition's a little more than just a certain amount of time. It's being able to be kind of flexible in the way you approach a question.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm pointing that out is because fluency often impacts students with disabilities. So if you have a student with a specific learning disability in math calculation specifically, that is where typically when you go back and look at a cognitive assessment, you'll see that the student has a cognitive deficit, and that impacts their ability to do these timed assessments. And then around that, you'll also see a lot of anxiety and meltdowns around kiddos because that's just not a skill that it comes easy to them. And my feedback to educators when they bring that topic up to me is we also around this topic need to be mindful of what are our Utah math standards. Like Jared just pointed out, the reason for the timing in these components, we don't want to get lost in the conversation that at the end of the day, we're really ensuring that our students are making progress in Utah math standards. And nothing in our Utah math standards says a student must do 10 math facts within 1 minute. Okay, while that might be a good math practice, specifically for our students with disabilities who that might be a struggle for them, we want to keep that in the back of our minds.
Yeah, and with that, I've seen my own daughter in 3rd grade. She'll come home with multiplication pages, which I think is great because she needs to practice and working on it. But it's maybe how that is approached and just being cautious, because it is a lot easier if you know your math facts. It's a lot easier to do some math questions. So.
Well, we used a time test as our screener becomes a fluency test. But I think that's back to kind of where you gotta go back to the purpose of this, right? It's a screener to identify the possible need for interventions. So you've gotta go back to the purpose. And so if the problems that they're completing are correct and they understand how to do the skill, do we put as much emphasis on they did 20 in a minute versus 10, but if they got all 10 of those correct versus 5 correct because they completed 20, I mean, you gotta go back to the purpose of what we're trying to do here. And I think those are the conversations that really have to be had with teachers.
Yeah, well, and it's not even the number, it's like the scoring's different as well, as far as points and correct digits and all of that. So we can definitely provide training and talk about the scoring and those type of things. There is an aspect of fluency. It's important that students are fluent in their use of math. That's the hope. So like Tracy said, if they're not fast, if they're thinking through it, like me personally, I take a long time processing things, so I might not be as quick, but if I'm getting things correct, or it's always better to be a little know it more fluently and be able to utilize that. So yeah, there's a balance.
Can I, Jared?
Yeah.
Also, along with what Tracy was saying, the Acadians assessments are meant to be used to help identify students who may be at risk, right? So there's more that we're looking at than just those one measures. So taking all of this into account, and that's why we do multiple different assessments, and we're constantly assessing our students to see how they're progressing with their skills, whether it's math or reading. But just remember, it's used to identify students who may be at risk.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, exactly. And so going back to the recommendation and what I was bringing up with these slides is, as you use your professional judgment as an educator, as you look at students and you utilize Acadians Math to flag early numeracy skills that a student may need support with, as you provide that support, just making sure that the progress, the monitoring of student progress is done in an effective and supportive way that aligns with what skill you're actually trying to teach that student to know with them. Aren't they graded by the tests though? Well, we're talking about progress monitoring right here, so as far as progress monitoring and for math, it's completely optional.
Other comment?
Yeah, we had our RFP meeting, so yeah, we definitely take the feedback and use that as we consider the early numeracy measures. Yeah. Okay. Next slide.
The names are in the chat.
Brittany's working on it.
Yeah, I'm working on a response in the chat. We are about almost exactly halfway through our time, so we are going to take just a 10-minute break since we do have quite a few slides still left, so we'll come back. Well, we'll take 11 minutes according to my clock. We'll come back at 10:40. Thank you.
Okay, so friends, normally you guys are my first group of people that I get information out to. You guys are the last group of people I'm getting information out to today. So I needed to come and give you an update on where we are sitting with Utah and our 1% alternate assessment participation threshold. This has been presented to your assessment or to your special education directors as well as Title I, but I wanted to make sure you guys had the same information as well. So go ahead and we can move to the next slide. So just a reminder of where this federal regulation sits. So when they reauthorized ESSA, it used to be that a state could only have 1% of our population be proficient in our accountabilities, year-end summative assessments. And now, they changed that so that a state can only have 1% of our student population participate in alternate assessments. And so when we are looking at this calculation and this regulation, we are just looking at those grades 3 through 10. Those are our year-end summative assessments, RISE, Utah Spire Plus, and DLM is our alternate assessment. Okay, go ahead next. Just some reminders about what our obligations as a state are under this new regulation. We are obligated to require any LEA that has assessed over 1% of your population on an alternate assessment to submit a justification letter to the state. We are also then charged with providing appropriate oversight to those LEAs that assess over 1% of your student population. Go ahead, next slide. With that, I want to be really clear that this regulation sits on the state level. So what I cannot do is I cannot go to you guys as a district or charter school and tell you that you cannot test more than 1%. So you are allowed to have over 1% of your student population participate. We just then have to ensure that we have the appropriate kiddos participating and that we're following the state's alternate assessment participation guidelines. So those of you that have been with us for a couple years, we present this every year and you can see our data. So we have slowly been inching towards this over 1% threshold at the state level, and we have hit it based on last year's testing. We are just slightly over, but we are over that 1%, and we are anticipating we will be receiving a letter from the Department of Education. Okay, next slide. So the number of LEAs this year that have already received that notification from me that they are over 1% and have to submit a justification letter. You can see just kind of the trend over the school years. We've had 53 of you folks out there assess more than 1%. So your special education directors have already been notified. Next slide. So if a state were to anticipate, or if a state believes, or they are over 1%, they do have the option to submit a waiver back to the federal government to waive this 1% threshold. However, a couple of the things that hinge on being what they call eligible to receive this waiver is that we have to have 95% of all of our students enrolled participating in assessments, as well as 95% of our students with disabilities enrolled participating in assessments. So we, as a state, are not eligible to submit a waiver. So in fact, this came up in the last couple months with our board when they were talking about what waivers we could possibly seek. And we informed them that this was one that we are not able to seek. So you can see just kind of overall where our participation sits here. One of the differences that happens with participation calculations in Utah is how we are allowed to participate or count participants for state accountability is different than how we have to report it for federal accountability. So these are all data points that go back that we report to the feds through what we call our EdFacts files. There's different rules in how we report those. So if you want more information on that at some point, you can reach out to me. Malia Michelena is the queen bee of understanding all of the nuances and differences, but we do report participation a little bit differently. Okay, next slide.
There's a quick question from Hal. How does this compare to other states?
As in like the over 1% or participation? How? I could probably go dig up the data to tell you how many states are over 1%, but there is a handful of states that are over 1%. We have had states like Ohio and Kansas was one. We do a lot of comparison data with Kansas because they're very similar to some of what we do with our demographics and number of students. So Kansas has been over 1% for several years, and they've implemented a lot of things that have come under. There are still states across the nation that are sitting over 1%. There are states that are struggling to move the needle any further, because there are some other states that have parent opt-out and that struggle with that 95% participation. And one of them is Pennsylvania. And so there are some places in where what is happening with states in this 1% data that things are starting to get stagnant. I meet twice a month with a national community of practice just around this. And in fact, we meet quite often with Don Peasley from the Department of Education. And so those are conversations that we're engaging in. But yes, there are many other states. I can't tell you exactly how many. Okay, next. So as we've been digging into this over the years, some of the questions that we started having was, is parent opt-out really affecting us as a state? Is that kind of our root cause? And so some of the data points that we've run over the last couple of years was looking at those December 1, those October 1, December 1, and year-end counts, and looking at what are we just identifying that 1% flag? What is the percentage of our students that we're identifying as students who would be alternate assessment takers? And so you can see just kind of the trends in the data here from October 1, December 1 to year-end counts over the years, that we are identifying in Utah more than 1% of our student enrolled population as students with the most significant cognitive disabilities participating in alternate assessments. So we can't really say that we as a state have come in over 1% due to the non-participation component. If we had all of our students participating that are enrolled, we would still be over that 1% piece. Okay, next slide. I do believe this is just another data slide that we've used to just kind of do that comparison and looking at that trend data that we've been using over the last couple of years to anticipate where we're at. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, so now this brings us to the meat. So we know that we are over 1%. What are the consequences? So this is a regulation that sits within ESSA, not within IDEA, which is our special education federal rules. Because this regulation sits within ESSA, the consequences for this come down on our Title I administrative funding. So what they have outlined as consequences is if we were a state between 1.0 and 1.3, which we are, and we would have been eligible to submit a waiver because we meet 95% participation, then we would have been in a place that we would receive a letter and then we would just be required to submit a plan for how we are going to come into compliance with this regulation. So they are very clear in their language that the expectations for states is to come into compliance and not assess more than 1% of our population on alternate assessments. So we do not meet that criteria. Next slide. So the anticipation is that when we receive this letter, it is anticipated probably springtime. Our EdFax data gets submitted the first part of January. So I would anticipate that probably March, April, we'll receive this letter from them. So where we think we're gonna land, because we are not or would not have been eligible to submit a waiver, that we will receive a letter saying that they are going to put a condition on our Title I Part A administrative grants. Part of that condition is that we will be required to submit a plan on how we're going to come into compliance. Go ahead, next slide. So we have already begun working on many of these things. It is our best guess. The next couple slides here talk about like what requirements there are in a plan. This is pulled from the regulations in If we want to submit a waiver, part of what happens when we submit a waiver is also submitting a plan. And so our best guess at this point is the things that are outlined there for the plan and the waiver is what we would be looking at submitting. So one of the biggest things in all of these regulations, compared to what we have done, is we have been defining this population of students as students with significant cognitive disabilities. When in fact, what we are talking about here and the students that can participate in alternate assessments are students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. So that is the work that we have been doing this year. So you can move to the next slide. And again, just more plan information, so you can keep going to the next slide. So there is a place within these guidelines that have come in from the feds where it talks about that we as a state are obligated to define who is a student with the most significant cognitive disability and set those guidelines and ensure that our IEP teams are following them. Next slide. And there is this space also where we are to also ensure that we are developing and disseminating information to ensure that a student with a significant cognitive disability who does not meet the criteria of a student with the most significant cognitive disability is participating in core curriculum and accessing those regular assessments. Next slide. So with that, we have begun the work of updating our participation guidelines and updating our definition of significant cognitive disability. So that actually went to our standards and assessment committee 2 months ago and passed there, and our updated definition of students with the most significant cognitive disabilities went to full board this past month and passed as well. So we are updating, we need to get all of those guidelines updated. Next slide. And what we have done is in that definition, we've added the word the most significant cognitive disability. And we have now, for the first time ever in Utah, put in some actual number criteria on a student's cognitive and adaptive score that is found in their special education eligibility as some guardrails to help IE teams better understand who this population of kiddos is. So we've added that these are kiddos that typically function at least 2.5 or more standard deviations below the mean. We also, as we have been monitoring this across the years and digging into IEPs and issuing findings, so we have been issuing findings to your LEAs through your special education directors when we find non-compliance. We have noticed that IEPs have been slowly moving away from addressing the significant impact in adaptive behavior, which is part of that 2-prong component for identifying these kids. So we have been working with your special education directors and teachers around that. So you can see in bold here, these are the things that we added to our existing definition to hopefully better come into compliance with those students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. So we have rolled this out to your special education directors, and I have heavily been engaging in those conversations. Next slide. One of the biggest questions for your information that came from your special education directors is where did we land on that 2.5 or more standard deviation component? So this is just a bell curve that comes typically from what we would see within cognitive assessments. And you can see here that about 1% of the population on a cognitive bell curve actually sits at 3 standard deviations below the mean. So we kind of decided to hit that in between for students to be identified with a classification of intellectual disability that sits on 2 standard deviations below. So that's where we kind of landed in that 2.5 spot. And that is what most, Hal, kind of back to what's going on with other states. That is where most other states have landed when they have been doing the work over the years, updating their definitions. So that puts us in alignment with a lot of what's going across the nation right now. So when I presented this to your special education directors, we dug way deeper into this in determining these things and talked about what does it look like? How do we make these determinations? How do we calculate this? And then, thinking about what do we do with training for teachers? But go to the next slide.
There was a comment from Kendra. I think you may have addressed some of this just now, but just checking.
Teacher, I was typing a response to you in the chat. Are you explaining your concerns or asking about your concerns with the student's cognitive function? Or are you concerned with what are like the students maybe like physical restraints?
Okay, so Kendra, this is some of the crux of the issues is it's, what's happening is we hear a lot of why are students participating in alternate assessments, and it's because they can't access the regular assessment, or they're not going to perform well on the regular assessment. So some of the work that we have to continue doing, and the regulations are pretty clear, that though a student has a significant cognitive disability, if it is not the most, they cannot participate in alternate assessments. So we have to do some continuing work in this state of how are we supporting those students with a significant cognitive disability and accessing our core curriculum. So there's been a lot of due process that's gone on around this. Andrew F. is one that your special ed directors are very well aware of. It is very clear in IDEA that no matter the severity of a student's disability, if they can access and show progress and measurable gains in light of their circumstance, and they can do that in the core curriculum, that's where they need to be. Assessment has to be the last decision point. And what we're finding is teams are putting access to our assessments before access to instruction and curriculum. So those are conversations that we're having across the state, having with teachers, and things that we're going to need to continue. And so, yes, there will be a population of kiddos that previously qualified for alternate assessments that will no longer qualify. So give me a second and we'll get to what our plan is and kind of how we're approaching this as a state and in conjunction with your special education directors. All right, next slide. So at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is reach that defensibility point. When we open up a file, can a stranger pick up that file for our teachers? Can we see why the team made the decision they did? And that is something that we've seen in monitoring. We really struggle to try to connect the dots to really seeing, is the student a student with not just a significant cognitive disability, but the most significant. So we're really trying to have spent the last 2 or 3 years really hitting this hard with our teachers and really trying to help define who this population of kiddos is. So next slide. Okay, this brings us to our current timeline. So notification letters went out to your special education directors. And Hal, I thought of you as I got halfway through. I know you guys wanted to be included on this. I will try to remember next year. So really at the end of the day, this is an assessment thing because we're talking assessment participation. It's a Title I thing because it's title funding that gets withheld. But really, we're talking about special education because it's an eligibility component. So they are my main focus with this. So I do appreciate that y'all want to be involved, and I will try to continue to do better. But those notifications went out. I have already received probably a good majority of justification letters back from your special ed directors. And you guys may be aware of this. They may have been reaching out to you. So those letters are officially due January 5th because there's a committee meeting on January 6th to review them. We will then choose which our LEAs are going to receive monitoring this year by the end of January. Next slide. So we added a couple components into this justification letter just so you're aware. We did ask them to just give us a running number of all of the classifications that their students are identified under for special education eligibility that participated in alternate assessments. So we're trying to get a better scope statewide around what that looks like. We have 2 eligibility classifications that absolutely cannot participate in alternate assessments, and those are students who have a specific learning disability and students who have an emotional behavior disability. Because in those special education criterias, it specifically states that the IEP team ruled out that it was not an intellectual component that was impacting that student. So that is one thing that we've asked them to do, is add this. And then we also had kind of dropped off looking at disproportionality. And so now that we're gonna be on the Fed's radar and they're gonna be looking at that, we kind of had to bring this back in. So we've calculated disproportionality. Does your LEA have a disproportionate number of students in certain student groups participating in alternate assessments? So there were only a couple that were identified. And just even those LEAs that were identified, I could clearly understand why. But anyway, that was a component that had to come back in this year. So go ahead. Next slide. Okay, we are upending monitoring. So here's where we land with monitoring. We understand that we have now just updated participation guidelines. We have set some different criteria and thresholds. There has to be time for this to be implemented, and at the end of the day, we're talking about students. So there is this philosophy, we don't punish students for adults' bad decisions. So we have changed this, and we are very in recognition that your special education directors and your students need time for this to implement and go into place. So what we are asking at doing right now is when for these new participation guidelines, any newly qualifying student that an IEP team is considering putting on alternate assessment, these new participation guidelines are to be in place and they need to adhere to them. What we are gonna do is in previous years, we actually chose LEAs, we chose students, and we said, we wanna see these students' files. And we had them upload students' eligibility, IEP teams, and we did full general supervision, monitoring through that, looking at compliance all the way from top to bottom. And so we are gonna not do that this year. What we are gonna do is when we choose LEAs, what we're gonna do is we're gonna pre-populate a spreadsheet based upon what we currently know in Scram. Meaning it is imperative that our data is coming correct in Scram and that those students that truly in their IEPs indicate alternate assessment participation, it's marked and indicated and they're coming through to us. So we're gonna pre-populate that, we're gonna send that off, and your special ed director is going to be asked to provide us some very specific information for every single student who takes an alternate assessment in their LEA. But we are no longer gonna look at files. So really what we're looking at right now is we're going back to that 2.5 or more standard deviations below. We're gonna look at cognitives and we're gonna look at adaptives and maybe a few other things, and we're gonna start seeing where are we in this range and what do we look like for the number of kids that we have that need to make some shifts. Okay, and then they will be asked to submit a plan. What we're looking for is to our students that are currently identified, currently been participating in alternate assessments, by March of 28, they have to be moved off. Because you can't just take and kick a kid out right now, depending on where they're at in that grade level. So we're asking for that plan. What is the LEA's plan, your special ed director's plan to really, to get these new guidelines in place over the next several years? So next slide, I think, has a little bit more implementation. So the directive that has gone to them, like we said, any newly qualifying, the guidelines are in place now. And then what we want to do is we are not focusing on high school students. So at this point, they have been embedded. I truly believe that when we do misidentify this and we have students in what we call this path, I hate the word the path, but when we identify them in this place, we put them on essential elements instruction and we give them alternate assessments, and they truly are not students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, we create that as a system. And so for those high school kiddos, we are not gonna monitor that. We're not really gonna look at that I think teams may need to consider those conversations. But what we're focusing on are our littles, those really elementary kiddos where we are not that far down the path, where they've been removed from those core standards and creating bigger gaps, that we want to put that focus on those those kiddos now that may not qualify. So I have also put a survey out to your special education directors, and we are going to start a community of practice starting this spring, and we'll run it for however long is needed to really support everybody in what are we doing with this. So we understand that there's probably additional support and training and guidance that's going to need to come from special education, and especially for those kids that no longer qualify. What do we do with them instructionally? Because we need to ensure that they're getting access to that instruction, therefore to be able to take those regular assessments. So it is a lot of things. We have already ball rolling. Obviously, you can see here, we have already been engaging in this work and having lots of conversations with your special education directors. I'm pretty sure I'm on speed dial with them all right now. And so that's where we're at. So it's the next couple years of support and kind of looking at what we're doing for training. So next slide, I think, has got our link. So here's a whole bunch of links that you can't access now until I actually get you the slide deck that works. But here's some information for you. I still have to update our website with the LEAs that were identified this year. So I'll get that underway before the first of the year. But I just wanted you were the last group to come to and say, here's what we got going and here's our plan. And so you can go to the next slide. Both Leah and I have been very open to, please call us, please contact us. You can yell at me, you can cry to me, you can do all of those things, and we will work through it. But you guys are great. Your special ed directors are great. I have a great relationship with a lot of them. So we've already engaged in those thought partnering conversations, and hopefully that community of practice will help. So that's where we are with 1%. I know. Any questions, concerns? You can always email me, you guys. So I guess for me, the question for your special ed directors, or what do they need help with? Do they need help with data components? So one of the things that they've been looking a lot at too with some stuff is participation codes. So that's another thing we found is we've had some LEAs that did not download those participation code files. Maureen, where are you? Where's Maureen? For Rise, Utah Aspire Plus. So Maureen has been very lovely in helping produce some of that. So data is really, and that assessment data is the biggest thing that a lot of your special ed directors are looking at, because they are also getting ready to roll into some other compliance stuff where they're going to get hit with some other indicator things around assessments. So data is a big thing. So just, help support them in that assessment data component. But participation codes and trying to figure out which students are not participating, why, is a big thing that Maureen and I are tackling right now on Rise and Utah Aspire Plus data. Okay. That's what I have. Merry Christmas, everybody.
This is the opposite of the Christmas movie.
I'm like, oh gosh, everybody's gonna see Tracy, and they ran the other direction. Anybody that's been sitting here doing this, we've been talking about it. We knew last year we were probably gonna tip. So it's all right. We'll work through it. We can do hard things. So, okay, thanks.
But get excited, because I'm the end. 10 more slides. So skip.
You don't have
Skip. Look away from the
This
screen. won't be in the recording that gets posted.
This was so important. We were gonna present it twice.
There we go. Okay. Just a friendly reminder for UTIPs. It is
unavailable to your teachers the first roughly 72 hours of a semester or a trimester. And so I'm just putting this in here as your reminder because a lot of you are switching semesters sometime over this break or in the next couple of weeks after. And a lot of times Maureen and I will get very concerned messages from teachers because their kids are in RISE, but they're not in UTIPS. UTIPS, the best way I can describe it is in the tech land of order of operations, UTIPS is at the bottom of the list. So sometimes it takes an extra day or two for your kiddos to load in there, okay? So, and I also understand that not everybody uses UTIPS. And so sometimes we forget that it's even there or how it runs and how it works. So this is just your reminder that if your kids aren't showing up after your semester or a trimester break, give it a few extra days and then reach out to us and we'll do some digging and see why. Also, class changes are also going to take that long to be fixed, okay? Go ahead and go to the next slide. We're gonna talk Avant for just a little bit with STAMP. Next slide. If you have any DLI questions, Carl Bowman is no longer with USBE. So if you have something very specific to DLI or you're looking at your reporting and have questions, you can reach out to Julie Clark in Teaching and Learning and she can possibly provide some assistance. I can sure try and I'm happy to try, but try is I might not succeed, but you can sure try. For your reports, if you have not yet looked into accessing those, I have put the link there for accessing reports. Maureen also gave you a little guidance on how to download those if you haven't yet. You can start to do that, but I would caution you if you have teachers who are still submitting rating reviews, because as my little meme on this particular page, there is still one more day that teachers can submit for rating reviews. So if they want to challenge a particular score for a student, there's one more day that they can submit those. Please make sure that they are submitting the form that is available on the link that's there for the advanced scoring review process. It's not just emailing Elise, which I also messaged last month, but it didn't get through to everybody. You gotta go fill out that. Please, oh please, fill out the form and we will get you taken care of in the next roughly 24 hours. And after that, the answer is no. And it will be no until the window opens again next October.
There's a question.
Okay. When do stamp codes need to be completed by? If you could get those done and ready by tomorrow as well, because that's when everything is then sent. Like Avant is going to start to do their stuff after the 19th.
So Elise, is it like with RISE, if they didn't test, like it was absent, does that automatically populate or do you have to manually put those?
You manually put in your participation codes, with the exception of the 200 that is.
Standard participation. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Ruth Ann, you cannot request a test reset. That window closed the 12th. In the spirit of UTIPS, do we have any idea if there will be RISE benchmarks for 9th and 10th grade by the start of next school year?
They will not.
No. But they'll still be in UTIPS for you if you choose to use them. Sorry, Brian.
All
We
right.
wish.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Has USBE been automatically applying code 112, or would my schools need to do that? We do not apply any codes automatically except for 200 and any 300s that go through data and statistics.
So if you have students on your rosters that weren't supposed to be there, we'll need to put in codes for them.
Yep. Also, since we're talking STAMP and Avant here, if you have any feedback, now that we've had an administration with the new vendor, if there are things that you loved, please let me know. Not in the chat, send me an email. If there are things you did not love, again, don't put it in the chat, send me an email so that we can provide feedback for the vendor. Avant they've been really great to take some of our feedback for enhancements in future administrations. And so I would like to be able to provide that for them if you have any that you would like me to send back to them. Good, bad, ugly, indifferent, anything at all. Moving on to RISE, the summative administration training has been scheduled for Tuesday, February 10th. From 9:30 to noon, you can register in Midas, as well as share that with anyone who you would like to attend. And just as a reminder for you here, the RISE reporting guide is currently being updated as it needs to include information for the ELA test and the writing test. So while what is posted is accurate for your math and science, just know ELA and writing updates are happening right now. And we hope to have those ready for you in the next couple of months before the administration occurs for summative. Looking ahead for RISE, when everything gets rolled in with our high school tests, yes, our go live dates are going to align. So we won't have separate windows or separate things like that. So get excited for less information to pass it along, but also with the math standards update, this also means that for the 26-27 school year, there will be no math benchmarks, interims, or fall math summatives because of all of the things that happen to get things ready for you. So this is just your piece of information to keep in the back of your brain so that you can be planning ahead. But I'm sure that you'll still reach out to the powers that be, all of us here, wondering in 2027 why you don't have any math benchmarks, but this is why. And we are starting to message it now so that maybe we don't have to message it as often later. I tried. For Utah Aspire Plus, the 2 slides for Utah Aspire Plus are actually the same from last month. So I'm not going to go over them in great detail. It's just that know that Adam will start to load January 5th. If you are planning to create your proctor groups, you'll be able to do that January 14th. And I also still included on the following slide the training information for the Pearson Tech training, as well as the Utah Aspire Plus administration training. Moving on to ACT, just some enhanced ACT general information because Utah is participating in the enhanced ACT administration. I think the other one's called Legacy now, the previous version. Anyway, enhanced ACT is a shorter assessment. If you attended the training last week, you were provided with loads of slides on this, which is great. But this is just kind of the Reader's Digest version. There are 75 fewer minutes and 44 fewer items. So that allows the student to have more time per question. And also the math responses are reduced from 5 answer choices to 4. The reading passages are shorter as well. But know that anything that you find on the internet may be inaccurate when it comes to science. Because science is still included for Utah. It's not optional for us. It is optional for national test dates. So know that if your students are taking the Utah State sponsored assessment, they will participate still in science. There is also a separate score, meaning the STEM score is going to be science and math, and then the composite score is math, reading, and English. If you want more information, I did put a link there, but that was also covered very well in the ACT training. If you missed it, it's linked on our website. Next slide. This is just the content breakdown. If you want more information, how the time and item allotments have adjusted for that enhanced ACT. So you can see the limited now number of items and for administration minutes for that to happen. Another enhancement that we are looking at now with the ACT test is the systems status site, which for many of you, this would have been incredibly helpful for last year's administration when things went not well. So what ACT has done is created a systems status website where you can go to see the status of various pieces of ACT. And I didn't have the URL until yesterday, so I'll drop that in the chat for you. So it's not on the slide, but this is what it looks like. And basically, Jessica actually pointed out the very best way to describe this is it's kind of like when your Wi-Fi is down and you go to your provider's little website on your app and it tells you why it's down and gives you an estimated time for when it is back up, or like the power company if you have an outage. This is what this is it's going to alert you of an outage if you go to the website.
Does this mean that it will fix it for you? No. But it does show you where the problem is. It gives you the help, like a helpline to call so that you can report it. Odds are they probably already know if they've reported it to you. But also, if this had been in place in March, when some of you experienced that issue, you could have had a contingency and plan in place for, oh, I checked the website this morning. We're gonna have kids here in 48 minutes to test and it's not actually up and running. What can we do in the meantime to ensure that things go more smoothly once the kids can get into the system? So this is just kind of like an alert system for you, okay? The next slide talks about our trainings. There is one more left in January. The other 3 are linked there for you. Even though they have the little strike through text, you can still click on the link and watch them. They're also posted on our assessment YouTube channel though. And remember, with these trainings, they are Zoom links that are provided in our memos as well as on the ACT Now resources page. You don't need to register for these ones. That makes it even easier for you to share that with anyone you feel might benefit from that experience. One last little slide here for Schmoop. They are also looking at revamping some of their tools so that it better aligns with the enhanced ACT. Those enhancements went live November 21st. Go ahead and go to the next slide. They're also still providing the on-demand ACT specific training videos, but they also want you to be aware that there are some ACT accessibility items coming soon. And there's also a test prep change log, which allows you to look at some other things. I've included that for you if you want to look at it, if you have schools who are using Schmoop. But this is just some updates for that ACT prep program that we are able to provide for you. And with that, friends, done. So you can wrap, who's wrapping up? Sid's not here. And
That would be me.
this is the end.
It's over.
We need to add a the end slide.
We should add a the end slide.
We're gonna have
so
a
that we
contest.
actually know.
You have reached the end.
I always told my students to not do that when they made slide presentations for class.
We're just a thank you for coming,
Thank-
not
yeah.
the end. Yes,
Till
thank you
next
for
time.
coming. So Sid is, I had to step out to the other meeting that she is participating in today. So thank you very much for coming. Please reach out if you do have questions because we are here to support you. Although I will say that a lot of our team is taking off some time during the next couple of weeks. So if they don't respond as quickly as usual, that would be why. And then Merry Christmas from all of us to all of you.
Y'all better be
Yes.
off too.
Question
I hope y'all
before
get
the end.
time off.
Before it's the end, so are you guys just doing these virtual now after this month?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So starting in January, our assessment director meetings will be virtual. So we're all coming back to the office 2 days a week and made that decision because we don't have very many people actually attending in person. So those of you that do attend in person, we're sorry.
But we'll be here Mondays and Tuesdays and you can come hang out with us.
All of you
then.
come sit in my office though, Christina, and bring me a bagel or. Or
But
glazed.
yes, so starting in January, all of our AD meetings will be fully virtual. And we are discussing some other things, and some, with having a fully virtual meeting, some things that we might be able to also offer because we'll all actually be sitting at home in our, not all together. And so thinking just about some ways that we might be able to further support or provide some additional training for those who are looking for it with that going to completely virtual format. But more information to come. That's it. Thank you.
Ta-da.